Today on the show, we're going to discuss how your tax savings and charitable giving strategies can be taken up a notch. So they've been around for a few years, but there's many people who have not heard about donor advised funds, and we hope to shed some light on these powerful vehicles in this show. So stay tuned. Welcome back to the MedTech Wealth Advisor Show, the show dedicated to helping professionals in the MedTech industry and retired people make smarter decisions with their money. We discuss a wide range of personal finance topics like retirement planning, equity comp, and investments. And it's all the goal to help you save more money, pay less in taxes, and align your capital with your values. So again, I'm your host, Matt Nelson, Senior Financial Advisor at Perspective 6 Group. If you want to learn more about the firm, check out perspective6group.com. But today, again, we've got Jacob LaRue back, financial planning expert. Love to banter with him about all things finance. Keeps it straight for me.
Making us sound like nerds now.
Yeah, well, we kind of are, on the finance side. I mean, the thing is, I used to think this was silly when I heard it when I was, shall we say, your age or younger. Right. But because I can remember everything back then. But frankly, Jacob, yeah. I've probably forgotten more than you know at this point, but it's quickly passing. I actually need your brain to keep me straight.
I can relate. I'm slowly getting there. It might be because I hang around you too much, but who knows?
Probably. Hey, I heard that the whole family was sick, just deathly ill. It seemed like for a couple of weeks. What's happening?
Yeah, I think everybody's better. My wife was down for almost 10 days, I guess, though. So she was down, but kids are good. She's good. We're rolling ahead. Just playing catch up now. Kind of exhausted. We've got our, busy meeting season happening, so we're gonna be busy here.
Don't get sick on me, Jacob. I need you there. Yeah, it's good. Yeah, well, we're finishing up hopefully by the time this airs, our roofing and siding project. We, as many in our neighborhood, I think actually at this point, I feel like everybody in our little neighborhood has had their roof replaced now. Like it just all summer, that's what's been going on. So a huge hailstorm last year. Of course, we got hit as well. Pretty big project, big messy project, doing the roofing and the siding. And as per usual with these remodel projects, this has taken probably 3 or 4 weeks longer, than the original plan, but it is what it is. I can't complain too much, but it'll be great to have it over with. I tell you what.
Don't have to do it again for hopefully 20, 30 years, as long as nothing bad happens.
I don't know. In Minnesota, it seems like we're replacing roofs every 10 years.
Snow's so heavy.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so on today's topic, we wanted to get into donor advised funds as part of a charitable giving strategy. And the last episode, as long as they air in order, we had talked about more of we'll call it the level 1 giving strategies. And they're all good. Some of the basics we covered, but we wanted to spend a little bit more time on this particular topic. We'll refer to them as DAFs, charitable funds, donor advised funds. You might see that all of those names if in print if you did some research. But we're going to cover what they are, when to use them, and go through a little bit of a case study.
Yeah.
So I think it's worth reiterating on this show. Start off with giving to, causes you care about. That should be the primary place that you start. So this isn't just giving to give, giving to save taxes only. Let's make sure you're prioritizing the desire to give over tax strategy. Doesn't make any sense to give $1 away just so you can save 40 cents.
Exactly. Yep. You don't want to gift something away if you weren't going to do it in the first place. So,
yeah, absolutely. But the second piece is if you got that straight, and if it's a good year to give, what's the best way to go about it? And so in the episode, we talked about the basic strategies. We covered how there's a standard deduction and an itemized deduction, covered how that's gone up now to close to $30,000. So depending on how you're giving, you may or may not be getting credit, so to speak, from a tax perspective. That can change with the donor advised fund. There's the biggest probably advantage of it is being able to give much, much larger amounts in a single year to the causes you care about. So you can get that deduction, so you can cross that itemized threshold. But you don't necessarily have to give all that money to the end charity. And that's the key. So before we talk about the exact mechanics, I just want that concept to be out there. Think of it this way. Think of it as having your investment account, and let's just make up a number. Let's say you have $1 million in your investment account, and you want to do a gift to a charity you care about that you give to every year anyway. You're already giving them $20,000 a year. Make the math nice. But if you're going to do that every year anyway, using a donor advised fund allows you to give, let's just say 5 years worth. Could be any number, but in this case, let's say 5 years of 20,000 is 100,000. You could give a whole 100,000 from your investment account to their donor advised fund, get tax benefit for a $100,000 gift, but now slowly give 20,000 a year out of your donor advised fund to the charity to meet whatever giving strategy you have.
Yeah. I think what you're talking about there is the key, because a lot of people think, hey, if I'm going to take 100,000 out of my investment account, I don't have to give it all in 1 year. They're like shocked every time they hear that.
Every time.
And no, you don't. You can actually dole it out over 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is from this donor advised fund. It's a great little account. I like to think of it as a charitable account that replaces like maybe your existing checking account that you would do for charity. It's kind of just setting your charitable money aside, and you can actually let it grow too. How about you talk about that a little?
Yes, you can. Yeah. And that's that. The growth part of it is that is the key, like you're saying, because in order to again, take advantage of the giving with the itemized, we have to do these large gifts. But then if you just had money sitting doing nothing, that starts to defeat the purpose. So if, in this case, if you gave 5 years, maybe 10 years worth of gifts all at once, huge tax deduction, it could be invested almost the same in most cases as your money had already been invested. So there's really, you give up nothing in that regard. Now, that's the big picture concept. I want to bring something home though. You don't technically own this fund anymore. That's really key to understand. So in theory, you're exchanging money from cash or investments to a donor advised fund that you can then invest. But technically, you're just giving direction to this donor advised fund. And a lot of times, by the way, let's use a name so it's easier to understand. We use a lot of this with Schwab because they have a donor advised fund that's very efficient, very low cost, allows us to invest in a lot of things depending on what we need to. So, and our clients might also have their investments at Schwab. So in their mind, they might move money from their Schwab brokerage account to their Schwab donor advised fund. They see it all show up in the same web portal. It kind of feels like it's still theirs, but it's not. It's not technically theirs. They just get to direct it.
Right. Yeah. To their grantor, essentially. So they get to send the money there and then send it out. But you can't pull it to your checking account.
Can't pull it back. That's right.
Schwab Charitable, or I know they're going by a slightly different name these days, but they're the charity. That's the charity. They're like the middleman for you. And then they will direct your money to any other charity that you typically give to.
That's right. That's the key. They act as the charity. That's the deduction you're getting. You donate it to Schwab Charitable, but they'll hold it in the account and take suggestions from you to where to give it. That's really how you want to think about it. And they'll let you take your time to do that. So you could keep it invested for many, many years and ultimately give it all to one other charity when you die or big lump sum. So you have a lot of discretion there. There's some keys there though that, if you don't give every year, for several years, I think you'll get a reminder from them to say, hey, this really is a charitable account. We need to kind of use it that way. And that's just to keep them out of the IRS's, off their bad list, right? Because if they just treat it as this almost legacy account and never actually give it, that can start to go against some of the rules that go along with giving. Now that we have the concept down, I want to explain something else before we move on to the when to use. So you could give directly to a charity, right? So you could give cash directly to, let's just say the local homeless shelter. Let's say that is your charity of choice. You write them a check. You could probably transfer stock to that organization if they're large enough and they can accept stock. But using a donor advised fund just cuts all of that out. You actually have a much easier time writing a check to the donor advised fund or transferring stock directly from your brokerage account to the donor advised fund. And then from there, usually these accounts have a nice interface, and you can go on, log on and say, send a check here, send a check there, send a check here. And it makes it super easy to take care of it. So in this case, we've worked with clients before who have done a direct to charity gift of stock. And it's really kind of a pain. Like, it takes quite a bit of work. We're happy to do it for the client, but frankly, it's a lot of work for them. It's a lot of work for the charity. There's some cost involved. And if we just go through a donor advised fund, it's super quick. It's super painless. The charity gets their money right away, so they don't have to worry about it. So it's actually better for the charity in many cases to be using a donor advised fund to facilitate the giving.
Yeah, better for the charity, better for really the client too, just from an organization standpoint, keeping track of their giving. Schwab Charitable will provide you like a nice little in-year letter. And like you were saying, you can log in and see that your transaction history, your grant history. It's really nice.
I actually love that what you just mentioned, because I remember one of the first clients I remember doing this with. The reason I brought it up to her is because she liked to give to a lot of charities, but just really small amounts. And it would range from, let's say, $50 to maybe a couple hundred, right? So she saw herself as charitably minded, which is great. But when we were talking about her budgeting and her cash flow, she really had no idea what she was giving, and she wasn't keeping track of all the receipts. Like, it was just kind of a mess. And instead, we transitioned her to just putting a lump sum chunk of money into a donor advised fund. And she had a blast just going on to the charitable site and just sending a $50 check here, $100 check there to all kinds of places. Didn't matter. Schwab doesn't care. And then she could see where she'd be giving over time and didn't have to track it. It was pretty fantastic, actually.
It's one of the hidden beauties of this strategy is just, we all give a little cash here and there sometimes. And if you don't keep track of those things, then you don't get any benefit for it later on. So
now that we have the concept, let's talk about when to use. So there's kind of two markers. Why don't you go over that when we sort of transition from one strategy to another?
Yeah, let's start kind of an age-based rule, let's call it. So, we kind of talked about QCDs in the prior episode, if you didn't listen to it. And typically those are going to kick in when you're 70 and a half. So let's talk about people who are under 70 and a half. These might be people who are still working or even just recently retired. But typically what we're looking for is if you have low basis stock. So I think in the prior episode we used Apple. Let's just stick with Apple. You might have bought Apple 10, 15 years ago. It's obviously grown over those 10 to 15 years. And now you don't maybe want to pay the capital gains. Well, how about we gift Apple to this charitable account? And if you are going to give to charity anyway, this is a perfect place to do it, because now you're going to avoid those capital gains on the Apple stock. So not only do you get money to charity, but you're also going to be avoiding the capital gains tax if you were to sell Apple which could be, 15% or 20% depending on your income level. So now you're getting a charitable benefit, you're avoiding capital gains, and you potentially are still letting that money grow in a charitable account so you can dole it out over a few years instead of all in 1 year.
That's right. Yeah. So I think where you're going there is that depending on the size of the gift and how fast you plan to give it to the end charity anyway, maybe you'd reinvest it. So if it was a really large gift, maybe you're going to give 5 or 10 years worth of what you normally are giving to the end charity, and you do it all in Apple stock. Well, that's enough that obviously you want to reinvest it, so you'll wait. You don't want that sitting there for a long time. I'll add to that some of these funds, including Schwab Charitable, once you've crossed a certain balance level, you can actually invest in individual stocks and bonds. So I believe right now that threshold is about 250,000. I'd have to just double check. It has been getting lower.
Sounds right to me. Yep.
We have some clients though with large donor advised funds where we're able to actually use this strategy. Once you've crossed that threshold, you can buy whatever you want. Up to that point, it's a lot like let's just say your 401k plan, where there's a lineup of 10 or 15 different options. They're all great, low cost, index funds. And we're fantastic for smaller accounts. As we get larger, we can buy whatever we want. So where I'm going with this is, let's say you didn't want to sell Apple. You're thinking Apple's going to the moon, or maybe better yet, NVIDIA, right? So NVIDIA to the moon, right? So who knows? But let's say you've got all this capital gain built up. You gift one of those stocks over, get the deduction. If it's a large enough account, you could go ahead and rebuy the same stock, or we should say direct Schwab Charitable Fund to buy that stock, and you're still holding it, and then give each year.
That's a great example. I think another part of it is, like you said in the beginning, it's really beneficial if you have consistent giving year over year. So it doesn't always have to be the same charity, but let's say on an average year you do give $5,000. Well, think about the standard deduction again. If you give $5,000 to a charity, just 1 year, you're not really going to get a tax benefit more than likely because the standard deduction is so high. But if we gift 10 years worth of $5,000 to this charitable account, well, now you're actually going to get a benefit from a tax perspective. You probably are going to itemize deductions because your charitable is going to exceed the standard, and you're avoiding capital gains on the stock. So you get 2 tax benefits there, which is exactly why you want to use it.
So that's good. So the last piece of this to think about for now is you may want to build up a legacy giving fund to be carried on past your lifetime. And this is super common. I'm sure many people have heard of, private foundations. There's community gifting funds. There's estate planning strategies that use trusts that go on for a long period of time. Well, think of this type of account, a donor advised fund or a charitable fund, as a very simple, very low cost way to build up a pool of money that can be gifted to charity over many, many years. And you can actually direct maybe your kids to be the people that are making suggestions for giving once you've passed on. I've seen a lot of interesting ways this gets used. Say there's a significant amount of money left over because huge amount of equity compensation was received as stock that was given to the donor advised fund for a major tax strategy, but it left $1 million or more in the account by the time the original client passes on. Their kids now can be named the new controllers of that account, and you could actually set it up so that they really need to get together once a year and decide where they're going to gift. So that maybe keeps the family together. It could be like a very interesting strategy. It actually opens up some doors for them because now they could be giving to places they care about, making connections and so forth. And so even though they can't take the money out and use it, they still can, see the value of providing to charities.
That's a really good example too. Just there is a lot of benefit there. Not only do you provide a legacy to potentially charities that you didn't even know about, but your kids might have their own charities that they care about. And
Yes.
being able to provide them with something that they're able to give to the ones they care about is a really big legacy piece that people don't often think about. So
it is. And it makes me think, if you didn't have children or other people that you want to carry that on, and there's a remaining balance, don't worry. There's another way to handle that too. You can actually direct these charitable funds to take all remaining dollars and send out to charities of your choice. So, and we encourage, all our clients to make sure they have those end charities listed. Maybe it directs that, hey, 25% goes to my prior college, 50% to, this homeless shelter, and the other 25% is left for my kids to direct. There's all kinds of different ways to handle it. So you definitely don't lose it. If you don't name beneficiaries, Schwab will give it out for you. So it's still going to go to a charity, an end charity, but you may as well pick where you want it to go.
Yep, I think that's super important. You don't necessarily want a third party directing your funds to be used for something you might not want it to. So,
all right. So that was under age 70.5. We prefer this donor advised fund. We do want to touch on why, when you reach 70.5, we want to be careful about using a donor advised fund under certain scenarios. So talk about that.
Yeah. So remember, 70.5, you have this option of using QCDs, and typically you're using those when your RMDs turn on too, which is around 73. And for the most part, most people should be doing that when they have RMDs because it's dollar for dollar reduction. But we need to take into account some other things like medical expenses, or maybe you have, two properties that have a mortgage and you're paying a lot of interest on the mortgages. More commonly would be the medical, though, I think, for retirees. And that's important because of the standard deduction. So let's say you had a really big medical expense year and it was $25,000, $30,000 worth of surgeries. Well, because there's medical caps tied to your income, you might actually not get a benefit for those expenses that you could maybe deduct unless you also used charitable giving outside of a QCD. So this is where the donor advised fund could come into play again. Now you're going to, bunch your medical with a large charitable deduction to this charitable donor advised fund, and you could exceed the standard deduction and actually get a benefit for some of these medical expense costs that came up or anything else like that. So like Matt was saying, there's just different ways to do it on a year-to-year basis, depending on what's going on with your life. It's not always A equals A. There's some different things that we need to consider.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. If you pair that, what you were saying, with maybe you happen to have a really large gain in a particular stock and you're trying to de-risk your portfolio anyway, that could be a situation where you'd say, hey, I know you have an IRA. We could give it from the charitable side, but this is also a method to take this year, bunch deductions, and de-risk your portfolio. That's a great mix.
Yeah.
Maybe you have an IRA and you're giving from your IRA, but you for some reason want to give a little bit more than the QCD that year allows anyway. And again, I keep saying QCD just to remind listeners, this really would be offsetting your required minimum distribution. So depending on the size of the IRA, that's going to determine your required minimum distribution. And let's just hypothetically say that required minimum for the year was $25,000, but you actually wanted to give 50 that particular year for maybe it's a specific capital campaign and they need the money now, so they can't wait for it. Well, a great example of maybe you give the full RMD and we figure out another way to put some money in a donor advised fund and you give the other 25,000. So there are reasons why we would use them past age 70.5, but we tend to prioritize giving to IRAs once you reach that age.
Great point.
Did you have a case study I think you were going to put together?
Yeah, I mean, let's just take a normal retiree, who may not be collecting, full Social Securities or pensions yet, and kind of finds themselves in a lower income year. And we might want to use a Roth conversion, which means we're going to shift money from an IRA to a Roth IRA, pay taxes now, but hopefully at a lower rate than maybe when RMDs kick in, 5-10 years from now. So that's a typical scenario there. But going a step further, if we can find a way to lower the cost of that Roth conversion even more, i.e. not pay as much tax this year, let's try to do that. So let's say you have some stock on the side that's appreciated over the last decade or so, and you also have some charitable desires. Well, now we can just use that donor advised fund that we've been talking about. Let's give some stock to it. Hopefully enough to get you above that standard deduction. So maybe you do 5 years worth of giving at $10,000, get you to a $50,000 number. Now we have some deduction built in there that we can use to offset the Roth conversion and pay less taxes. So that's a really good strategy that we like to use. Very common one. You get money over to a Roth IRA, which is then tax-free, and you're doing it at a really low rate. And on top of that, you're giving to charity. And on top of that, you're avoiding capital gains on the stock. So a lot of positives there.
Super positive. Yeah. Actually, we used this strategy, I believe, with a couple of different clients to exit our infamous, we should say, the annuities, some like really high cost annuities we had to get out of. And we are, I will use this to interject. We are not big fans. They, usually a very big pain. So we were trying to get out of these annuities for some clients. And this strategy worked perfectly because just like your Roth conversion example, this client had some big charitable goals anyway. We were able to do some giving and pull money out of this annuity, which normally would have been, fairly high taxable situation, and offset it. It worked beautifully.
Yep. I'm going to say this too. I keep referring it to as stock. Like, yeah, it works really well if you have single stock or a few stocks that have appreciated over time. But this works with mutual funds and ETFs too. Like, you can gift those securities that have appreciated to donor advised funds. It doesn't have to be single stocks.
Right.
So don't think that this is like not for you if you don't have it. So
that's right. Well, very good. I love it. I think this was a good conversation. Hopefully there was some tips people picked up before. And I'm sure people have heard the term, maybe a donor advised fund or charitable fund, wondering what it is. I hope this sheds some light. Really, if you just want to make the most of your giving strategy, make sure you're actually making your itemized deductions work, and, not getting this mixed up with standard deductions or, not getting any benefit for giving in the first place. A donor advised fund really could be an advanced strategy to help bring that all together. Or if you just need to offset a large income year for some reason, like we're going over with the case study. So look into it. We're happy to answer any questions, calls for guidance, or just a second opinion. Totally fine with that. If you want to learn more about our group, you can find us at perspective6group.com. That's the number 6. Certainly call me directly, 952-225-0333. But check out our website. We do have some good articles there to get you started. And if you have suggestions for future shows, let me know. We've got an email dedicated here. It's mwapodcast@focusfinancial.com. mwapodcast, focusfinancial.com. That actually is perfect for us to hear what you want to hear about. So until next time, financial freedom takes more than money. So find your purpose, make a plan to live your life well. If you need any guidance, we're here to help, and just take care of each other out there.